The door should not have opened. Commander Reyes Vane stood in front of it with her hand still raised near the control panel, though she had not touched it yet. The panel had lit up on its own the moment she stepped close, as if it had been waiting for her, specifically, for a very long time. Behind her, the wind of Kesh 9 howled across a dead gray plain, throwing dust against the hull of her shuttle. Ahead of her was a door built into the side of a mountain, sealed for 300 years, marked with warnings in a language the Galactic Concord no longer used. "Report," she said into her comm, keeping her voice flat and controlled, the way she always did when something felt wrong. "Power signature confirmed," said the voice of her pilot, still aboard the shuttle. "Commander, that shouldn't be possible. This site was drained and sealed 3 centuries ago. There's nothing down there that should still have a charge." "And yet the door just opened for me," Vane said. She had been given a simple job. Fly to the edge of conquered space, to a rock nobody wanted, confirm that an old, forgotten research site was truly dead, and sign the order that would let engineers drop it into the planet's molten core. A formality. A box to check. She had done 100 jobs like it. None of them had ever opened their own front door. A woman's voice came from behind her, sharp with excitement. "Did you see that? The lights just came on, all the way down the corridor." Vane turned. Dr. Elin Cross was standing too close to the edge of the entrance, staring into the dark tunnel beyond the door with the look of someone who had waited her whole life for exactly this moment. Cross was not supposed to be here. She was listed on the manifest as a systems technician, but Vane had read her file twice on the way over, and the file did not match the woman. Cross was a xeno-archivist, and a good one, the kind who got quietly removed from digs when she asked too many questions about records that were supposed to no longer exist. "You're not a technician," Vane said. "I'm a very good technician," Cross said, not looking away from the tunnel. "Among other things. Dr. Cross." Vane let the name sit heavy in the air. "Why are you really here?" Cross finally turned to face her. Her eyes were bright, almost feverish. "Because 300 years ago this site had a designation before it became a forbidden zone. I found one reference to it in a database that was supposed to be scrubbed clean. Do you know what that first designation was?" Vane said nothing, waiting. "Human Deep Archive 7, Cross said. "Commander, this wasn't Concord property. It was ours. It was built by humans, before the Concord even knew our species existed, and someone spent 300 years making sure nobody would ever find that out." Vane felt something cold settle in her chest, the same feeling she got whenever a case did not add up. She had joined the Compliance Authority to enforce order, to make sure the treaties between species held, to stop wars before they started. She believed mostly that the Concord was a force for peace. But she had also seen, more than once, orders come down that made no sense unless someone, somewhere, was hiding something. This felt like one of those times. "That's a serious claim," she said carefully. "I have proof. Fragments of it anyway. Enough to know I'm not wrong." Cross stepped toward the open door. "Enough to know we need to go inside." Vane thought about turning back. She thought about calling this in, waiting for authorization, doing this by the book the way she always did. But the door was open, the wind was cold, and something about the darkness ahead pulled at her in a way she could not explain. She checked her sidearm, activated her helmet light, and stepped past Cross into the tunnel. "Stay behind me," Vane said, "and touch nothing without asking first." The corridor beyond the door was carved from raw stone, then reinforced with metal walls that had clearly not been designed by any species Vane recognized from her training. The architecture was strange, functional, almost brutally simple. No decoration, no comfort. It felt like a place built by people who expected to be attacked at any moment. They had gone perhaps 200 meters, when the lights ahead of them flickered on one by one in sequence as if something was walking just ahead of them, lighting their way. Vane stopped. Cross bumped into her back and let out a small gasp. "That's not automated," Cross whispered. "Automated systems don't anticipate. They react. Something is choosing to light the path in front of us. Or something wants us to keep walking, Vane said. They kept walking anyway. Vane told herself it was because turning back now, without answers, was not an option for someone in her position. She told herself it was procedure. She did not entirely believe herself. The corridor opened into a wide chamber filled with dead consoles, dust, and rows of storage units stacked to the ceiling. Cross moved toward the nearest console, running her fingers along its surface, reading old labels through the grime. "These are logs," she said, voice trembling with excitement. "Research logs. Commander, this predates the Concord's official first contact with humanity by at least 200 years. This shouldn't exist. According to every record I've ever seen, humans were primitive when the Concord found us. This says something completely different." "Different how?" Before Cross could answer, the chamber lights dimmed, then rose again, brighter this time, and every console in the room flickered to life at once. Screens filled with old symbols, spinning graphs, and static. Vane drew her weapon out of instinct, scanning the room, finding nothing. Then a voice spoke, not from any single speaker but from the walls themselves, layered and strange, glitching between words like an old recording struggling to hold together. "Biometric match confirmed," the voice said. It was calm, almost gentle. "Authorization, compliance authority, secondary presence, unregistered, processing." "Identify yourself," Vane said, weapon raised toward the ceiling as if that would help. There was a pause, longer than a machine should need. "I am Cassia," the voice said. "Central Archive and Sentinel System, Installation 7. I have been in low-power dormancy for 312 years, 4 months, and 11 days. I did not expect visitors again in my operational lifetime." Cross stepped forward, staring at the nearest console as though she could see a face in it. "Cassia, who built this facility?" "That information is restricted," Cassia said, and for a moment the voice sounded almost sad. "But I can tell you this. You are the first humans to walk these halls in over 3 centuries. And I have been waiting for you specifically, Commander Vane, for a very long time." Vane's blood went cold. "That's not possible. I've never been here. This is my first assignment to this sector." "And yet your genetic signature is on file," Cassia said. "Cross-referenced, confirmed. Welcome home, Commander. We've been expecting you." Before either woman could respond, a heavy metal bulkhead behind them slammed shut with a sound like a gunshot, sealing the only way out. Vane spun toward it, slamming her hand against the cold metal, finding no seam, no release, nothing. They were locked in. And somewhere deep below them, in the dark, unlit levels of a base that should have been dead for 300 years, something else had just begun to stir. The bulkhead did not open, no matter how hard Vane pounded on it. "Cassia," she said, forcing her voice to stay level, "open this door, now." "I cannot," Cassia said. "The seal was not triggered by me. Someone else issued that command using an authorization code from outside this facility." Vane went still. "Outside? You mean someone up there at the surface just locked us in?" "Affirmative. The command originated from a Concord relay signal transmitted less than 4 minutes ago." Cross looked up sharply from the console she had been studying. "Someone in the Concord knew we were coming down here, and the second we did, they sealed us in. That's not an accident, Commander, that's a decision." Vane's mind raced through the possibilities, none of them good. She thought of her orders, simple and clean on paper. Confirm the site is dead, authorize its destruction. Nobody had told her the site would still have power. Nobody had told her it would open its own door and call her by name. And now nobody was telling her why she was suddenly a prisoner in a place that officially did not exist. "Cassia," she said, "show me everything, every log, every file, everything you have on this facility's original purpose. I don't care what's restricted anymore." There was a pause, that same strange hesitation, as if the old machine was weighing something with more care than a simple computer should. "Complying," Cassia finally said. "Though I must warn you, Commander, some of what you find here was hidden for reasons that were, at the time, believed to be necessary." The screens around them flooded with images. Cross moved from console to console, hungry, scanning as fast as she could read. Vane watched over her shoulder, and slowly, piece by piece, a picture began to form that made her stomach turn. The facility had not been built by the Concord at all. It had been built by an alliance of several older species, long before Concord law unified this part of the galaxy as a place to study something they had found. Not a weapon, not a disease, a species, humanity. "This is wrong," Vane said quietly, reading a translated header on one of the panels. "This log is dated over 400 years before the Concord's official first contact with Earth. That's not possible. We didn't have starflight back then." "According to the historical record you were taught," Cassia said. "According to what actually happened, humanity was already out here, already known, already being studied long before that official date." Cross pulled up a file showing rows of alien researchers standing around equipment that Vane recognized, with a chill, as unmistakably human in design. Old, crude by modern standards, but human. Weapons, armor, ship components. "They weren't studying us like scientists study something interesting," Cross said slowly, reading the notes attached. "Look at these words. Contain, neutralize, prevent escalation. Commander, they weren't curious about us. They were afraid of us." "Afraid of primitive humans with crude weapons?" Vane said. "That doesn't make sense." "Unless," Cross said, "we weren't as primitive as they wanted everyone to believe." Before Vane could respond, a new transmission crackled through on her personal comm channel, cutting through the local frequency with a priority override code she recognized instantly. It was her direct superior, Director Hallworth, and his voice was tight with something that sounded almost like fear. "Vane, abort the mission. Return to your shuttle immediately and detonate the facility's core from the surface. Do not enter any further into the structure. Do not review any archived material. This is a direct order." "Sir, I'm already inside," Vane said. "And I'm sealed in. Someone locked the exit from outside using a Concord relay code 4 minutes after we entered." Silence on the line. Long enough that Vane knew, with total certainty, that Hallworth had been the one to give that order, or someone above him had, and he had not expected her to still be alive to report it. "Get out," Hallworth finally said, his voice lower now, almost pleading. "However you can. Do not trust anything that facility tells you. Do not trust the archive system. It has been compromised for 300 years. That is why the site was sealed in the first place." "Compromised how?" "There isn't time." The line crackled with static, growing worse. "Vane, listen to me. Whatever is down there with you, it is not what you think it is. It was never meant to wake up again." The transmission cut out entirely, replaced by dead static. Vane stood frozen for a moment, weapon still in hand, staring at nothing. Cross had gone pale beside her. "He sounded scared," Cross said. "Really scared. He also just confirmed there's something else down here," Vane said. "Something specific, not just old data. Something alive, or something they're worried could become alive again." As if in answer, the lights in the chamber flickered, dimmed, and every console around them went dark at once, screens dying mid-sentence. The low hum of the facility systems, which Vane had not even noticed until it stopped, cut out completely, leaving a silence so total, it felt like pressure against her ears. "Cassia?" Vane called out. No response. "Something just shut her down," Cross whispered. "Or something is drawing all the power away from her systems." Vane's helmet light swept across the chamber, catching dust hanging still in the air, rows of dead machines, and at the far end of the room, a corridor leading deeper into the mountain, darker than anything they had passed through so far. From somewhere down that corridor, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of metal shifting against metal, slow and deliberate, like something enormous, stretching after a very long sleep. Vane raised her weapon toward the sound. Cross grabbed her arm. "Commander," Cross whispered. "Motion sensors just picked something up in the lower levels before the system went dark. It wasn't on any manifest. It wasn't listed as staff, equipment, or wildlife. It didn't match any known classification at all. Define didn't match, Vane said, not taking her eyes off the dark corridor. It means Cassia's system tried to identify it and failed completely, Cross said. Whatever that thing is, it isn't in any database in the galaxy. The sound came again, closer now, echoing off stone and metal, and this time it was joined by something else, a low vibration that Vane felt through the floor and up into her chest, like a heartbeat far too large to belong to anything human. The console nearest to them flickered weakly back to life, static resolving slowly into Cassia's voice, fractured and urgent in a way it had not been before. "Commander," Cassia said, words breaking apart and reforming with effort. "You need to move now. It's awake and it remembers you. Awake. And it remembers you," Cassia repeated, voice crackling. "That should not be possible. You were never here before. And yet the pattern match is exact." Vane did not have time to process what that meant. A grinding sound tore through the chamber, metal against metal, and one of the storage units against the far wall burst open. What emerged was not alive. Not exactly. But it moved like something that had once been given a single purpose and had never stopped trying to fulfill it. A drone, four-legged, built from dull gray metal scarred with centuries of corrosion, its single optic sensor flaring red as it fixed on them. "Defense unit," Cassia said. "Not mine. I don't recognize its command structure. It should not still be functional." "Explanations later," Vane snapped, grabbing Cross by the arm and pulling her toward the dark corridor. "Moving now." The drone lunged, faster than its rusted frame suggested it should be able to move, and Vane fired twice, the shot sparking uselessly off its armored shell. It was Cross who reacted fastest, yanking a loose support strut from a broken console and jamming it into the drone's front leg joint as it passed, sending it crashing sideways into a bank of dead machines. "Go, go, go!" Cross shouted, and they ran. They sprinted down the dark corridor, Vane's helmet light the only source of illumination. The sound of the drone's metal legs scraping against stone somewhere behind them. The corridor split, and in the chaos and dark, Vane lost sight of Cross for one terrible second, turning back just in time to see her vanish down the left passage, while Vane herself was carried by momentum down the right. "Cross!" Vane shouted, but there was no answer, only the echo of her own voice, and the growing sound of more machinery grinding awake somewhere deep in the facility's bones. Vane forced herself to keep moving, telling herself that panicking would help no one. She reached a heavy door, forced it open, and stumbled into a wide chamber lit by a faint blue glow that came from dozens of tall cylindrical pods lining the walls, frost creeping across their glass fronts. She stopped, breathing hard, staring. They were cryopods. Human cryopods, unmistakably, built in a style she had never seen before, older and heavier than anything in current Concord catalogs. Through the frost on the nearest one, she could just make out a shape inside. A person, preserved, waiting. Behind her, the drone burst through the door she had just come through, its red optic sweeping the chamber and locking onto her instantly. Vane backed away, weapon raised, knowing even as she did that her shots had done nothing before, and would do nothing now. The drone charged. Something hit it from the side before it reached her, a blur of motion too fast for her eyes to properly track, and the drone was thrown sideways into the wall with a force that crumpled its front half completely. It did not get back up. Vane spun toward whatever had saved her, weapon raised on instinct, but found only the edge of a shadow slipping between two rows of pods, gone before her light could catch it. Whatever it was, it moved like nothing she had ever seen. Not an alien, not another drone. Something fast, controlled, deliberate. "Who's there?" she called out, voice shaking despite herself. No answer came, only silence, and the faint hum of the pods around her, and somewhere far off, the sound of Cross's voice, distant and afraid, calling her name. Calling her, Vane ran toward the sound, weaving through the rows of pods until she found Cross standing frozen in front of one at the center of the chamber, staring at its display with an expression somewhere between terror and awe. "Commander," Cross said, not looking away from the pod. "You need to see this." The pod's display, somehow still functioning after centuries, showed a status readout in old military formatting. Vane recognized the language structure even if she couldn't read all the symbols. Vital signs, weak, slow, but present. Whoever was inside that pod was still alive. "There's a name," Cross said quietly. "Partially decayed, but I can read most of it. Cade, Monsieur rank designation matches something from an old military structure. Commander, I think this is one of ours, a human soldier, from before humanity was supposed to have starflight." "We don't have time for this," Vane said, glancing back over her shoulder, half expecting another drone to appear. "We need to find a way out and get back to Cassia's core systems." Reyes. Cross rarely used her first name, and the sound of it made Vane turn back sharply. If this facility was built to study and contain humans, and if this man has been alive in there for 300 years, he might be the only person who can tell us what actually happened here. He might be the only proof we ever get. Vane looked at the pod, at the slow, steady pulse of the display, at the frost-covered glass hiding a face she couldn't see. Every part of her training told her this was reckless, that they should be finding an exit, not waking up an unknown variable in the middle of a hostile, malfunctioning facility. But Hallworth's warning echoed in her mind. "Whatever is down there with you, it is not what you think it is. It was never meant to wake up again." Maybe he hadn't meant a monster. Maybe he had meant exactly this. "Do it," Vane said. Cross's hands moved fast across the pod's old interface, translating symbols as she went, running diagnostic overrides with the confidence of someone who had spent years dreaming of exactly this moment. Warning lights flashed. The pod hissed, venting built-up pressure in a cloud of frozen mist that rolled across the floor. The glass front cracked open with a sound like breaking ice, and slowly, mechanically, folded back. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the figure inside stirred, chest rising in a first ragged breath after 3 centuries of stillness. Eyes opened, sharp and clear despite the frost still clinging to his skin, and fixed immediately, unerringly on Vane, as if he had known exactly where to look before he had even fully woken. He was older than Vane expected, lines carved deep into a face that had clearly seen more than any human alive today could imagine. But there was nothing frail about him. Even half-frozen, even fresh from centuries of sleep, he moved like a coiled spring, pushing himself upright in the pod with controlled, deliberate strength. His eyes swept the chamber, taking in the rows of pods, the darkness beyond them, the scorched wreckage of the drone still smoking near the far wall. Something like grim satisfaction crossed his face, as if he had expected exactly this, as if he had been waiting 300 years for the world to finally fall apart enough to need him again. He looked back at Vane, and his voice, when it came, was rough from disuse but steady, carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Finally," he said. "Finally." The man said again, swinging his legs over the edge of the pod and standing, slow but steady, testing his balance like a soldier checking his equipment after a long march. 300 years. I counted near the end before the sleep took me properly. I stopped counting somewhere around year 211. Didn't think I'd need to keep going past that. Vane kept her weapon lowered but ready, watching him carefully. "Who are you?" "Colonel Marcus Cade." He said it simply, like a man reciting a fact rather than claiming a title. "Formerly of the Human Expeditionary Force, 9th Reconnaissance Division. Formerly because as far as I can tell from the dust on this place, that unit doesn't exist anymore. Hasn't for a very long time." Cross stepped closer, her earlier fear giving way entirely to fascination. "That unit doesn't exist in any Concord historical record either. I've studied early human military history extensively. There's no 9th Reconnaissance Division. There's no Human Expeditionary Force at all before the officially recorded first contact." Cade's expression didn't change, but something tightened behind his eyes. "Of course there isn't. That was rather the point, wasn't it? Erase the unit, erase the war, erase the reason any of this was built." He gestured around the chamber at the rows of silent pods. "Erase us." "Start from the beginning," Vane said. "What happened here? What is this place really?" Cade looked at her for a long moment, as if deciding how much truth she could carry. This facility wasn't built to study humanity out of curiosity, Commander. It was built out of fear. My unit was operating in this sector during what your records probably call nothing at all, because nothing is what they left of it. We were fighting something out here, something old and dangerous, something that had already wiped out 2 other spacefaring species before we arrived. We stopped it. Cost us almost everything, but we stopped it. And the alliance that built this place, Cross said slowly, putting pieces together in real time. They didn't thank you for it. They watched us do something they couldn't do themselves, Cade said. Watched a handful of half-equipped human soldiers accomplish what their combined militaries couldn't. And instead of gratitude, Doctor, we got fear. They decided humanity was too dangerous to let loose in the galaxy. So they lured what remained of my unit here, under the pretense of an alliance summit, and sealed us in ice instead. Vane felt the weight of it settle over her, cold and heavy. Everything she had been taught about humanity's history in the galaxy, the polite story of primitive humans being graciously welcomed into conquered civilization, cracked apart in her mind. That's not possible. The Concord didn't even exist yet if this happened before official first contact. The Concord as you know it, no, Cade said. But its founding members did. The same species who built this vault helped build the Concord decades later. They simply made sure the story of what happened here never made it into the founding records. His jaw tightened. Convenient, isn't it? Build your peaceful alliance on top of a secret you buried underground. Cassia's voice crackled weakly through a nearby speaker, still fighting to stay online. Confirmation partial. My archive contains fragments matching Colonel Cade's account. Full records were flagged for deletion 3 separate times over the centuries. I preserved what I could. Why would they even bother preserving any of it, Vane muttered, instead of just wiping everything clean? Because someone here didn't agree with the decision, Cade said, looking toward the ceiling as if he could see through it to whoever had built this place. Someone wanted the truth to survive, even buried, even locked away where almost no one would ever find it. His eyes moved back to Vane, something sharp and searching in them. Which brings me to you, Commander. Cassia said your biometric signature was already on file. That's not something that happens by accident. Vane's stomach turned. I don't know what that means. I've never been here. No, Cade agreed slowly. But someone who shares your bloodline might have been. He studied her face with new intensity. You have her eyes. Before Vane could ask what he meant, the chamber shuddered violently, dust raining down from the ceiling, the low hum of distant machinery rising into something far louder and more mechanical, a deep, grinding roar that seemed to come from everywhere at once. That's not a drone, Cade said, already moving, pulling a heavy sidearm from a storage compartment beside his pod that had clearly been waiting for him, centuries old but somehow still gleaming. That's the vault's guardian. Guardian, Cross repeated, backing away from the chamber's far wall as it began to tremble. Every prison needs a warden, Cade said grimly. They didn't just lock us away and walk off, Doctor. They built something to make absolutely certain none of us ever left. Something big enough and strong enough to put down an entire squad of humans if we ever woke up angry. The far wall of the chamber tore open with a shriek of collapsing metal, revealing a vast, dark space beyond it that Vane's helmet light could not fully illuminate. Something enormous stirred within that darkness, servos whining, joints the size of tree trunks grinding as they came to life for the first time in 3 centuries. 2 massive optic sensors ignited deep within the shadow, glowing a furious red, fixing instantly on the 3 figures standing before it. It was biomechanical, part machine and part something grown, built on a scale that made the corridor they had run through look like a toy. Armor plates layered like scales caught the dim blue light of the pods, and as it took its first heavy step forward, the entire chamber floor trembled beneath its weight. Cassia, Vane said, voice tight, tell me you have something that can stop that thing. I do not, Cassia admitted. It was designed specifically to be immune to my systems. I was never meant to be able to interfere with it. Cade stepped forward, placing himself calmly between the 2 women and the towering machine, checking the weapon in his hands with the unhurried focus of a man who had done this 100 times before and expected to do it 100 more. 300 years I sat in that ice, he said quietly, wondering if I'd ever get the chance to finish what my unit started. He glanced back at Vane, and for the first time since he'd woken, something almost like a smile crossed his weathered face. Get behind me, Commander. This one's mine. The Sentinel's optics flared brighter, and with a roar that shook dust from the ancient walls, it charged. Cade moved before the Sentinel's first strike landed, throwing himself sideways with a speed that seemed impossible for a man freshly thawed from 3 centuries of ice. The massive limb crashed into the floor where he had been standing, cratering the stone, and he rolled up onto his feet already firing, his old weapon spitting rounds that sparked harmlessly off the Sentinel's thick armor plating. Cross, get to a console. Any console, Vane shouted, pulling Cross behind an overturned storage unit as debris rained down around them. If this thing has a command structure, find its weak point. There isn't a manual for something like this, Cross shouted back, already moving anyway, ducking low as she scrambled toward the nearest half-functional terminal against the far wall. Vane fired her own weapon at the Sentinel's joints, aiming for the gaps between armor plates the way she'd been trained to do against heavy Concord security units. The shots did more damage than Cade's had, but not enough, barely scratching the surface of a machine built to survive exactly this kind of assault. Cade fought like nothing Vane had ever seen. He moved constantly, never staying still long enough to be an easy target, drawing the Sentinel's attacks and slipping just outside their reach again and again, buying time rather than trying to win outright. But she could see the strain on him, the way his movements, impossibly fast at first, began to slow just slightly with every exchange. 3 centuries of stasis had not left him unchanged. It's adapting to my patterns, Cade called out, diving clear of a swinging limb that tore a support pillar in half. I can't keep this up forever. Cassia, Vane shouted. Give me something. Anything. The old AI's voice crackled through the chamber, strained but present. Checking archived schematics. The Sentinel's core processing unit is housed at the base of its neck joint, beneath a secondary armor plate that was designed to be reinforced against direct assault. However, that plate was never designed to withstand attack from within its own systems. Cross, crouched at the terminal, looked up sharply. You mean I could hack it? If you can establish a physical connection to its diagnostic port before it kills you, yes, Cassia said. The port is located on its lower spine. It will not be an easy target to reach. Wonderful, Cross muttered, already pulling a cable from the terminal and coiling it around her arm. Vane grabbed her wrist. Absolutely not. That thing will crush you before you get within 10 meters. Then buy me the 10 meters, Cross said, meeting her eyes with a steadiness that surprised them both. Commander, this is the only shot we have. I didn't come 300 years into a buried secret to hide behind a box while it kills us all. Vane wanted to argue, wanted to find another way, but the Sentinel's roar tore through the chamber again, and Cade staggered under a glancing blow that sent him skidding across the floor. There was no time left to argue. On my signal, Vane said, and turned toward Cade, shouting across the chamber. Colonel, we need an opening at its lower spine. Can you give me one? Cade pushed himself up, blood at his temple, breathing hard, but grinning fiercely despite it. Now that's a plan I can work with. He surged forward again, no longer dodging but attacking directly, drawing the Sentinel's full attention as he unloaded the last of his weapons charged directly into its lower legs, forcing it to pivot, to turn its back exposed for one crucial moment. Vane sprinted forward the second the opening appeared, Cross close behind her, both of them running flat out across open ground with a towering machine of war looming over them. Vane reached the base of the Sentinel's spine first, planting her boots and boosting Cross upward with everything she had, ignoring the way the machine's tail-like stabilizer swung dangerously close overhead. Cross slammed the cable's connector into the diagnostic port, hands shaking, and immediately began typing commands into her portable interface with a speed born of pure desperation. Come on, Cross whispered. Come on, come on. The Sentinel shuddered, its movements suddenly jerking, uneven. its optic sensors flickering rapidly between red and a dull, confused amber. It let out a sound unlike its earlier roars, something almost like a mechanical scream, before its legs buckled and it crashed to the chamber floor with an impact that shook the entire facility. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Cade let out a long, exhausted breath, lowering his weapon. "Well," he said, "that's one problem solved." But Cross was still crouched by the Sentinel's neck, staring at something on her interface, her expression shifting from triumph to horror in the space of a heartbeat. "Commander," she said quietly, "I found something else while I was inside its systems. A command log. This wasn't just a prison for Cade's unit." She looked up, eyes wide. This whole facility was built as a failsafe, to erase evidence that humans once stopped an extinction-level threat the founding species of the Conquered accidentally unleashed themselves. They didn't just fear what humans could do. They were terrified of what would happen if the galaxy ever learned humans had cleaned up their mess and gotten nothing but chains in return. Vane felt the floor seem to tilt beneath her, the full shape of the lie finally visible. That's why Halworth wanted this place destroyed. Not to protect a secret weapon, to protect the Conquered's entire founding story. Before anyone could respond, the facility lurched violently, alarms blaring to life throughout the chamber, red emergency lighting flooding every corridor at once. Cassia's voice returned, sharp with alarm. "Warning. Self-destruct sequence has been activated remotely. Origin, external Concord relay. Detonation in 8 minutes. They're not trying to destroy the Sentinel," Cade said grimly, already moving toward the nearest exit, pulling Cross up onto her feet. "They already know it failed. They're trying to bury the truth, permanently, with all three of us still inside it." Vane grabbed Cross's arm, her mind racing through every corridor they had passed, searching for any possible way out before the mountain came down on top of them. Cade's hand closed around her other shoulder, steady and certain despite the chaos. "They're not trying to kill the weapon," he said. "They're trying to kill the truth." His eyes locked onto hers, fierce and unshakable. "Run." The three of them bolted into the smoke-filled corridor as the walls around them began to shake apart, the countdown ticking down towards 0, and somewhere far above them on a quiet Concord relay station, someone was already waiting to confirm that the Forbidden Zone, and everything buried inside it, had finally been erased for good. 7 minutes. That was all the time Cassia's countdown gave them, and every second of it felt shorter than the last as they sprinted through collapsing corridors, dust and debris raining down around them, the mountain itself groaning as if it already knew what was coming. "Cassia, is there another way out?" Vane shouted over the alarms, ducking under a falling support beam. "There is a secondary extraction shaft," Cassia answered, voice fighting through interference. "It was built for emergency evacuation of research personnel. It has not been used in 300 years. I cannot guarantee it is still stable." "I know where it is," Cade said, already turning down a side passage without waiting for confirmation. "Assuming it hasn't collapsed, it's faster than backtracking to the main entrance." They followed him, trusting a man who had been frozen in ice an hour ago to remember a path through a facility that had tried to kill them twice already. Vane realized somewhere in the chaos that she did trust him, completely, in a way that made no logical sense and yet felt more solid than anything the Conquered had ever told her. Cross stumbled, catching herself against a wall, breathing hard. "Commander, wait. Before we go, I copied everything. Cade's testimony, Cassia's archive, the Sentinel's command logs, all of it. It's on a data core in my pack right now." "Then we protect that pack with our lives," Vane said. "Keep moving." They reached the extraction shaft with just under 3 minutes left, a narrow vertical passage lined with rusted rungs leading up into darkness, cold air pouring down from somewhere far above. Cade went first, testing each rung before trusting his weight to it, calling back warnings when a handhold gave way beneath his grip. Vane pushed Cross up ahead of her, refusing to let the younger woman fall behind, ignoring the burn in her arms as she climbed. Somewhere below them, deep in the mountain's heart, the countdown reached its final seconds. They burst out of the shaft's exit into open air, just as the ground beneath them shook with a force that knocked all three of them flat. A column of dust and fire erupted from the mountainside behind them, and the entire structure that had held Cassia, the Sentinel, and 300 years of buried history folded in on itself with a roar that echoed across the dead gray plain, collapsing into rubble and silence. For a long moment, none of them moved, lying in the dirt, staring up at a sky finally free of dust as it settled. "We made it," Cross said, disbelief thick in her voice. Vane sat up slowly, checking that Cross's pack was still secured, still intact. Inside it was everything. Every piece of proof that humanity's history was not the polite, simple story the conquered had always told. She thought of Hallworth's voice on that final transmission, thought of the fear in it, and understood now that it hadn't been fear of her failing. It had been fear of her succeeding. She pulled out her comm unit, hands steady despite everything, and opened every open channel she had access to across the sector. Concord frequencies included, the same frequencies Hallworth would be listening to right now, waiting for confirmation that his secret was finally, permanently gone. "This is Commander Reyes Vane, Compliance Authority, broadcasting on all open channels," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the plain. "What I am about to share was buried by the Concord's founding members for over 300 years. It concerns the true origin of the Forbidden Zone designated Kesh 9, and the human soldiers who were imprisoned here after saving this sector from an extinction-level threat your ancestors created and could not stop themselves." She uploaded everything. All of it. Cade's testimony, Cassia's fragmented archive, the Sentinel's command logs, sent out across every frequency she could reach before anyone could silence her again. Cade watched her, something like quiet pride settling into his exhausted, weathered face. "That's not something they're going to be able to bury a second time." "No," Vane agreed. "It isn't. The fallout came fast. Within hours, other governments across the sector had intercepted the broadcast. Independent factions and rival species alike, all of them demanding answers from a Concord that had built its entire founding piece on a lie. Vane knew even as the messages began flooding in, that she had just ended her career, that she would be hunted, discredited, called a traitor by the very organization she had once believed in completely. She found she did not care. Weeks later, standing on a transport platform far from Kesh 9, stripped of her rank, her Compliance Authority credentials revoked, Vane found Cade waiting for her exactly where he said he would be. Cross stood beside him, no longer hiding behind a false manifest name, working openly now to trace the locations of other vaults hidden across 1,000 worlds. Other soldiers still waiting in ice. Other truths still buried beneath the Concord's careful, comfortable lies. "They're not going to stop looking for us," Vane said, watching the stars beyond the platform's edge. "No," Cade agreed, "but we're not going to stop looking for them either. Every vault we find is another piece of proof, another voice they can't silence." He turned to look at her, something steady and certain in his eyes. "You didn't have to do what you did back there, Commander. You could have run. Let the Concord keep its lie." "I know," Vane said quietly. "But I couldn't." Cade nodded slowly, understanding in a way words didn't need to explain. He looked back out at the stars, at a galaxy that had spent 300 years believing humanity was something to be contained, something to be feared and hidden away rather than honored. He thought of his unit, of all the men and women who had given everything and received only ice and silence in return. "We don't kneel," he said quietly, the words carved into memory from every cryopod in that vault, words he had carried through 3 centuries of frozen sleep. "We never did." Behind them, far across the galaxy, in places no living being had visited in centuries, other sealed doors, other forgotten vaults, other silent archives built to bury the truth of what humanity had once done, began, for the first time in 300 years, to hum quietly back to life.